Hey guys, so today we're going to be going over vehicle-specific enclosures. This is going to be the first video of many to come regarding these types of boxes or enclosures. But today we're going to be starting with Atrend's MDF version of their Ram box. In today's market, people want more space, but they want sound quality. That's totally achievable with many types of enclosures, and you don't have to have a huge box or enclosure in the back of the vehicle to get good sound. Here's an example of a generic box. Now this is Atrend's truck box. And you can see here, it's very slim for the most part, and in a lot of trucks, like a Dodge Ram Mega Cab for example, this will fit behind the seat. And you can also use this in a lot of other vehicles too, where space is tight. You don't have to use it only in trucks. Now what happens if you have a vehicle like a Dodge Ram that's not a Mega Cab and the only place for space is underneath the seat? At this point, you're going to have to do a vehicle-specific enclosure. This is going to be an enclosure that's pretty much is only going to work in this vehicle. Fortunately for Dodge Ram owners, this dates back as far back as 2003. So this is their MDF version, and you can see here, the enclosure is deep here to fit inside the cargo area underneath the seat. The rest of it's flat to fit on top. So a few reasons why you want to go with a vehicle-specific enclosure. One, it looks a lot better in the vehicle because it is designed for that vehicle. Two, maybe you don't have a lot of space, but you want to maintain functionality. You can maintain most of it with a sub-enclosure that's designed to be in there, so it doesn't take up a lot of space. What are the downsides? The only downside is when you buy a new vehicle, if it's not the exact same vehicle, you can't really use it anymore. Now, this enclosure is great for people that are on a budget. It's a little bit of an upgrade compared to the stock Alpine system enclosure, and it's definitely better than nothing when you don't have a subwoofer at all. Now, the only downside to enclosures like this is you can see here, because it's wood, we lose a lot of volume as opposed to if we were to do a fiberglass version of this. With the fiberglass version, we maximize air volume for this particular set because we don't have a lot of room to begin with. So this type of enclosure, you don't have too many options when you're dropping in subs. So for those of you that have watched my previous video on how to load a sub enclosure, you might remember that I used this exact version or an older version of this style of enclosure before from Atrend. Now, this particular enclosure, like I stated before, you're going to be very limited. I'm only going to suggest you put in very entry-level subwoofers in here because of the low air volume provided by this enclosure. Now, what they have done is they have modified the design a bit, so you're going to have very little fitment issues. They've brought the walls out for the lower portion away from the opening, and they've also chamfered it 45 degrees on the inside, so you're going to have a lot easier time putting in the subwoofer with a basket that sticks out a little bit further. So this Alpine baseline I have here drops right in very nicely. So another quick note about this particular enclosure is the terminal cup. It's not a big deal if you know what you're doing, but because the sub loads on this side and your terminal cup is all the way over here, you will have to uninstall this, add onto your wires, bring it back on across, that way you can attach your subwoofer. Okay, let's quickly load this enclosure. First thing we do is take out the terminal cup. Next, I'm going to solder on my leads. You don't have to do it this way. You can use a female spade and just clip them on. I just prefer to do it this way. Now we go ahead and feed our wires in and put the terminal cup back in. Now, when you are tightening this and using a drill or an impact of any sort, yes, you do want it tight to have a good seal, but don't over tighten it because this plastic isn't the strongest and it can crack if you over tighten it. So you got your wire run through, and all you have to do now is bare off the ends. Now, you have to be paying attention. Now, depending on the wire you're running with, I don't know. On this particular wire, it has writing on it on one side, and that side's gonna be my positive. Okay, got our wires hooked up to the sub. You just drop it in now. Now you're almost done. You just have to secure the sub What I'd usually recommend doing is having people pre-drill just as a good practice. On a carpeted box, you don't really have to, but try practice pre-drilling your holes before you secure the sub. I've already gone ahead and done that, so now we can just load up the screws. Now, a couple pointers when you're about to load a subwoofer. One, try to use a bit like this with the sleeve. That way, when it's down, you can guide it better, and it's less likely to ever slip and come back at the woofer. Now, if you're not using something like this, even if you're using something like this, I still recommend also drill position. Always have the drill with the battery in the center of the sub, because when people slip, because of the weight, it always wants to kick out. If you kick out, it's hard doing this though because of the ridge, but if you kick out this way, it's going to go right into the surround. So always have the battery in the middle of the sub as you go along. That way you're less likely to ever damage the sub. Also, tighten in a crisscross fashion, just like a wheel.